Thomas, Elliot, welcome. Let's praise creation.
Greetings. First, I would like to have everyone do a poem. So I'll read it through, and then you recite it yourselves. This is a bit of verse for a 10-year-old child. It's an adult and a child. And the recovery of youth for the adult. And it goes this way. Summertime near. I'm here, you're there. Let's go down the hill, across the field to the creek. Careful, don't fall. Cold water, bare feet. Awaken to a youth I thought was lost. Well, here you go. Summertime near. Summertime near. I'm here, you are there.
I'm here, you're there.
And put a flower in your hair.
Put a flower in your hair.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Down the hill.
Down the hill.
Across the field.
Across the field.
To the creek.
To the creek.
Careful, don't fall.
Careful, don't fall.
Cold water, bare feet.
Cold water, bare feet.
Awaken to a youth I thought was lost.
Awaken to a youth I thought was lost.
That's the first thing I would say. And this next one is also for children. There were some children in the public school in Brooklyn, and they went to the Brooklyn Botanical Garden. And after that, they did some drawings of what they had seen. And one little girl, 9 years old, had drawn a picture of the trees. And she sent it to me. And I still have it on my refrigerator door, which is where you put children's works. So you'll see them. So I wrote this back on this occasion. We are all children of the forest. Here we are sheltered from the sun. As we watch the squirrels climb through the trees, the deer browse the small budding bushes. Here in the forest, we listen to the wind as it rustles the leaves of the great oak trees. We listen and we learn to make music on our flutes and our drums. We are all of us children of the forest. The winds, here the rain drips down, gathers into streams, then into rivers that flow far away into the deep blue sea. The squirrels and the rabbits, the winds and the rain, we dance and we sing and we all play together. Trees, the flowers, the butterflies, the birds and the chipmunks, the bear and the deer. All of us, we're children of the forest. We whirl and we tease and we chase one another until the western sky glows in the golden light of evening. And we lie down to sleep beside each other in the warmth of the night that covers us with a blanket of darkness. While the stars come out and sing to us as we drift far away, far, far away into dreamland. So, this next poem is a wedding ode. And the wedding that it was written for took place in this region, in the Appalachian region. I would like to read it to you first. It has a kind of rather deep, thoughtful, meaningful context, a person might say. And so I'd like to read it to you first through. And then I'd like to read it to you again while Elliot accompanies this with his music. It's called The Quiet Hills of Carolina. But the main point of this poem, though, is that it's a wedding ode. And weddings are momentous occasions, and we have to celebrate with such exuberance and all that. But still, there is a certain solemnity in the change of life state and the entering into such a profound commitment. It's a moment of quiet when every ensouled being feels a vast surge of existence that emerges from the primordial beginnings of time. A moment when the wild depths of the universe take over our being in a great tide that sweeps over us, and we experience our participation in the distant liturgy of the stars. Then we feel lost in an immense loneliness of soul that can be sustained only by a shared presence with someone who also has known such a moment in the evening hush of these ancient hills. You can see when two lonelinesses come together, then they fulfill each other. That in our isolated self, we can experience kind of a lost moment. But I'll read the poem once more, and we'll have some music with it. There's a hush that comes over the Appalachian Mountains in late autumn. A blue mist settles over the hills while the wind softens in the evening. It's a moment of quiet when every ensouled being feels lost feels a vast surge of existence that emerges from the primordial beginnings of time. A moment when the wild depths of the universe take over our being in a great tide that sweeps over us, and we experience our participation in the distant liturgy of the stars. Just then, we feel lost in an immense loneliness of soul that can be sustained only by a shared presence with someone who also has known such a moment in the evening hush of these ancient hills. Yeah. Yeah. Here is a bit of verse called Valentine season. It's not really so much about Valentine, but about late February as a transition period of the seasons. But in the things that I write, a person has to understand the scene before me. This is an ancient or an old, centuries-old, three-story house of Elizabethan architecture that was built a century and a half ago. And it's on the river. It's one of the most lovely sites on the river. It was falling down and about to be demolished when I kind of volunteered to take it and build it up to put a research center there. But it's on the river, and across the river, there are the Palisades. Now, the Palisades are an ancient basalt formation that when the basalt magma cooled, it splintered into columns. So these dark columns rise rather far into the sky. And that's the opposite. That's the west side of the Hudson River. On the east side is where I am. And I see it, and the river flows north-south, the Hudson River. And it's the only river that flows through the Appalachian Mountains at sea level. There's almost no gradient in the Hudson River. There's only a few feet gradient, that's why the tide goes up almost 100 miles up the river. But and there is this, I call it the Great Red Oak. It's a northern red oak tree, 23 feet in circumference, 7 feet, almost 7 feet in diameter, 450 years old. It's possibly certainly one of the oldest and largest of the red oak trees in the state. And I often refer to that. I dedicated The Dream of the Earth to the great red oak beneath whose sheltering branches this book was written. That's a very simple dedication to the great red oak. And these all enter into the verse that I write. It's kind of repetitious even, the extent I mention the river, the Palisades, the great red oak, and the striations on the embedded rock in the area, the striations formed by the glacier. But this is kind of a meditative piece called Valentine. It's night upon the river, mid-February. Venus shines out of the wintry sky. From the distance, the Palisades loom starkly over the world. Such a night sends the mind back into those billion years it took to frame all this. The great red oak, itself a newcomer here by the embedded rock, with its long glacier striations. It's all here. Too overwhelming for human endurance, were it not for radiant memories of the willows seen earlier today, yellowing in the late evening sunlight. So it's that hopefulness of the willows that have a yellow leaf as it goes into the late evening sunlight. Now here's one, and another one that we'll all learn. I'll read it, and then we'll have the music with it, and you recite it. It goes this way. Earth's desire. We've been talking a lot about the earth these days. So I did this little piece And a lot of my little pieces are just 3 or 4 lines, and this is not a long one, called Earth's Desire. What does the earth really want in relationship to ourselves? What was the earth looking for when it brought us into being? And this is the answer to that question. Called Earth's Desire. To be seen in her loveliness, to be tasted in her delicious fruits, to be listened to in her teaching, to be endured in the severity of her discipline, to be experienced as that maternal source whence we become the final destiny to which we return. It's that simple. That's simple. Here we have it. To be seen in her loveliness. To be tasted in her delicious fruits. To be listened to in her teaching. To be endured in the severity of her discipline. To be experienced as the maternal source whence we came. The destiny to which we return. Go ahead. This is entitled Late Summer in Carolina. Most memorable, and these are my early memories. I left Carolina and was gone for, when I was 20, I was away most of the time, although I came back 2 or 3 times a year for 50, 60 years while I did some trying to put some Southern intelligence into the Northern universities. And in the Piedmont section, of course, we have honeysuckle. I hear that the honeysuckle is an invasive plant. It's not native to this country, but it certainly has become nativized. Most memorable, the sweetness of honeysuckle down in the hollows on early summer evenings, the swelling sounds of night over the land, crickets down in the meadow, katydids in the oak and maple trees, while along the shallows of the creek, the deep resonance of bullfrogs telling the world the joys of existence along the marsh's edge. The sough of winds in the pines, fireflies flash their momentary light. Then the stars come out in the heavens to shatter our souls with loveliness beyond endurance. I've written a fair amount about my family. I consider maybe the greatest blessing of my childhood to be a member of a family of 13 children. 10 children younger than I, and people say, my goodness, your mother must have an awful challenging time. But then I tell her she was out playing bridge 3 days a week. So when some of them were sick with a little flu, and I was in the room, there were 4 or 5 of them down sick, and she came in to me and said, you take care of them, I'll go down and play cards. She was the best card player in the area. I tell people that we felt secure at home because something happened to my father. My mother could support us playing cards. But that's not all. My mother was once elected as the, while she raised 13 children, she ran some international women's organization, the Altrusa Club, I remember. So she was somewhat on the, a person of broad interests and so forth. And anyway, she got some awards in New York at one time. And she went to New York and got a certain amount of celebration and all that. And my one of the reporters was talking to my brother, Francis, and he had just finished medical school, and he was in York, and the reporter wanted to know how we were raised. My mother, whenever she was asked that question, said, how did I raise my children? With a lot of healthy neglect. And so my brother Frank, he was asked, you know, did you have to be in a special time of night and all that? And he says, the old man might want us home. I'll come in by 11 if you can make it. But the porter pressed him and said, what would you do if you came home and the door was locked? Oh, he said, no big deal. I just sat on the doorstep till Mama came home. This is a piece that I wrote when we had a family gathering. It's a somewhat lengthy piece. When we had a family gathering on my older sister's 80th birthday, this was some years ago, I guess she'll be 90 on her next birthday. I was the third. The oldest was Jack, and then my sister Elizabeth, and then myself, and then on down. But we were gathered around, and so I wrote this in honor of my older sister. It's a kind of a overview of the 20th century. This took place, I've forgotten the exact year, but it'd be around the early 90s, called the Old House. We lived in south of rather older part of the city, and early as I could remember, and then as the family grew, we needed more space, and so my father was, by that time, he had gotten together a little money and had a house built out on the border of the city. And that was when the city was 20,000. I remember in Greensboro, 15,000, now 250,000. But this is reflection on the old house. It was the new house, but now it's the old house. There were lilies in the field across the creek when first we came to the old Kirkpatrick place, along the northern border of the city beyond Irving Park. There were lilies in the field that spring. The first time I saw them blooming there above the thick grass, crickets were singing everywhere. Mules with a drag pan had dug out the basement. The wooden frame was set in place. Then the brick was laid, tapestry brick it was called because of the deep colors baked into the clay. It was 1927, the year after Benedict was born. We moved from Douglas Street in January, it was, a few months before Lindbergh flew the Atlantic. There the house stood on Colonial Avenue off Cornwallis Drive, maybe 8 miles from the battlefield where Cornwallis fought the farmers of the region under General Greene. It was 2 years before the Depression broke over the land. The Jefferson Building on the corner of Market and Elm gave a certain lofty feeling to the town of 20,000. I was in the 7th grade. St. Benedict's School opened that year. We think of these things, they settle in the mind. We do not really understand just what it all means. We wonder. We bought our first radio, listened to Amos and Andy. Mary Elizabeth at school in Emmitsburg came home on the Crescent Limited. So many things a person forgets as the years pass. The books we've read, the movie scene at the National or Imperial Theaters, Douglas Fairbanks, Mary Pickford, Greta Garbo, Valentino, Chaplin, Keaton, and Harold Lord, and William S. Hart, the original two-gun Western hero. So much we forget. The long breakfast room table, the large kettle over the open fire in the backyard on Wash Day, Mercer's 5-gated horse with its graceful plantation walk. We played drop the handkerchief Sunday mornings when the generations chased each other around the circle together with friends each of us brought home from church for breakfast. It was a gracious time. We wondered about our future, but not often. There were meals to be served, lessons learned. Now it's all a deep feeling of time gone by. A floating world, a drifting through each day, surviving presently. Somewhere there was meaning. Now the 20th century is almost over. We have lived, the 13 of us children, under the encompassing care of parents dedicated to us beyond measure. William from Owensboro on the Ohio, Elizabeth from nearby Waverly. We have lived, children of the 20th century, and married too, more fortunate than we deserve. Jesse and Polly, Ginny and Mary Elizabeth, Jane, Rosemary and Stephanie, not to forget Snooks and Boots. We have lived these 80 years, raised families, fought wars, taught students amid the ruins of Manila, built a hospital in Cochabamba, written books, managed a business, assisted in childbirth, supported causes, survived each other. All in all, nothing spectacular. We have simply done what was to be done. Now we gather in remembrance on this joyful yet somewhat poignant occasion. Our reflections deepen, but only slightly. We were never very conscious of who we were or what our lives might mean. Anne and Catherine and Jack have gone into that other world that eventually claims us all. Meanwhile, we have our unspoken remembrances that we carry in our minds 80 years and more. It's all rather much a blur, more a feeling, a sense that life has been kind to us beyond anything we could have imagined or merited. Life has indeed been kind to us, tinged as sunlight on a misty day, filled with rainbow colors. There are few things that I remember clearly, only the field of lilies across the creek. I saw them there. It was a morning in May. This, I guess we can keep you all night. I'd love to do it.
We're not going anywhere.
But this is the only bit of writing that I would really claim as a poem. The others, it's largely a prose with a poetic touch here and there. But this, I think, is a poem. It's called a Solstice Poem. It was written after the solstice concert, or what do you call the winter?
Winter solstice.
Winter solstice of Paul Winter's consort that played in the Episcopal Cathedral of John the Divine in New York City. The dean there always said that Paul Winter and myself, I had introduced a thought or two about what I call the third mediation, is originally the human divine mediation. Then in more recent time, Christianity have been concerned with the interhuman mediation, the social issue of the Christ and the poor, or the suffering. But now we're into the third mediation, the human-earth mediation, where the Christ-earth equation, or the cosmic dimension of the Christ reality is found. And anyway, He says that I turned his thinking upside down. He was thinking that here we were at the peak of the whole creation. When I told him the earth is more important than we are, he anyway, he claimed that Paul Winter and myself were his two cohorts in crime. And he made me a, what do you call it, a cathedral, canon of the cathedral, official honorary, of course. But anyway, this I wrote a Saturday morning after the Friday night concert, or the Solstice concert of Paul Winter and his group. So the next morning, I wrote this, and Elliot may give us a little background as we go along. A barbarous setting for winter music, Gothic. Out of the dark Eurasian continent, vast, turbulent, was the great Gothic cathedral, and this music was deep, dark solstice music when the sun is at its low point, and we enter into that moment, and that we have to get the dark side before we get the positive side. And we never knew when Christ was born, what time of year, but when they came, this is a couple hundred years after the time of Jesus, when they began to think, well, maybe we'll have a celebration for his birth. So they started thinking around, and they decided the solstice would be a good time. They had the Easter, the resurrection, but the solstice is a dark moment, but it's the turn toward the light. It's the dark, and that's why the darkest moment is the opening toward the light. And that's why when we're in our deepest troubles, well, you figure it can't get any worse. So, this is what I wrote. And winter here is a play on words, Paul Winter as well as winter. A barbarous setting because of the Gothic architecture. The later 15th, 16th century people had returned to classical architecture. And so they look back at these gorgeous churches of the 13th, 14th century, they call it barbarous. Well, it was in a sense, but it had a type of beauty that classical art can't quite express. So there's a heavy Gothic emphasis here. A barbarous setting for winter music, Gothic, because it's played in total darkness. Gothic, out of the dark Eurasian continent, vast, turbulent. Limestone columns, stone locked into stone by the heavy pull of gravity, lightly arching into the distant sky. Dark, dark as a cave, as a kiva. Music, dark, rumbling sound, drums, strings, winds, organ, whale song from the deep of the sea, wolf cry from the forest, pathos of earth. Gothic dark, drumbeat, heartbeat of a planet poignant as eternity come into time, time resonant with eternity. Human cry, wolf cry, whale cry, cathedral cry, cry of the sun, sinking into darkness. Not now, ritual terror of a time when the sun's conquest was assured, Now the terror of a death darkness descending over the life planet, we flee. Where to? Back into the night of nights before creation flared forth its trillion-degree sunburst. Back into the cave, back into the forest, to the guardian spirit of the North American continent. We have heard in this cathedral, Bach's Passion, the lamentation of Jeremiah, ancient experiences of darkness over the earth and light born anew. But now darkness deeper than even God can reach with a quick healing power. What sound, what song, what cry appropriate, what cry can bring a healing when a million-year rainfall can hardly wash away the life-destroying stain? What sound? Listen. Earth sound. Listen. The wind in the hemlock. Listen. The owl's soft hooting in the winter night. Listen. The wolf. Wolf song. A cry of distant meanings woven into a seamless sound. Never before has the cry of the wolf expressed such meaning. On the winter mountainside, morningside, this cry, our revelation as the sun sinks lower in the sky over a wounded world. The meaning of the moment and the healing of the wound are there in a single cry, a throat opened wide for the wild sacred sound of some great spirit. Wakantanka, Orinda, the Manitou, hovering over the darkening earth. A Gothic sound, come down from the beginning of times, if only humans could hear, thoughts too fixed in human frame for the healing remedy of earth language. How break the pattern of Little Red Riding Hood? How see the wolf as guardian spirit, as savior guide? Our Jeremiah, telling us not about the destruction of Jerusalem or its temple. Our Augustine, telling us not about the destruction of Rome and civilization. Our Bach, telling us not about the passion of Christ in ancient times, but about the passion of earth in our times. The wolf, our earth, our Christ, ourselves. The earth, the arch of the cathedral itself takes on the shape of the uplifted throat of the wolf, lamenting our present destiny, beseeching humankind to bring back the sun, to let the flowers bloom in the meadows, the rivers run through the hills, and to let the earth and all its living creatures live their wild, fierce, serene, and abundant lives. I'll teach you one more poem. It's a bit long for you to learn, I don't know, but I'll read it through once, and then you can repeat it after me as I read it the second time. Called An Appalachian Wedding, again, a wedding ode. Look up at the sky. The heavens so blue. This is as bright as the Solstice Poem. Look up at the sky. The heavens so blue. The sun so radiant. The clouds so playful. The soaring raptors, the woodland creatures, the meadows in bloom, the rivers singing their way to the sea. Wolf song on the land, whale song in the sea, celebration everywhere, wild, riotous, immense as a monsoon lifting an ocean of joy, then spilling it down over the Appalachian landscape, drenching us all with a deluge of delight, as we open our arms and rush toward each other, you and I and all of us, moved by that vast, compassionate curve that brings all things together in intimate celebration, celebration that's a universe itself. So let's recite it. Look up at the sky. The heavens so blue. The sun so radiant. The clouds so playful. The soaring raptors. The woodland creatures. The meadows in bloom. Rivers singing their way to the sea. Wolf song on the land. Whale song in the sea. Celebration everywhere. Wild, riotous, immense as a monsoon. Lifting an ocean of joy, then spilling it down over the Appalachian landscape. Drenching us all with a deluge of delight. As we open our arms and rush toward each other. Paul and Ches and all of us. Moved by that vast, compassionate curve that brings all things together. In intimate celebration. Celebration that's the universe itself. Thank you.
Oh, man, that was just beautiful.